Code Mystics is at it again with the first ever over-the-air delivered firmware update for an Arcade 1-Up product ever. And I've originally kind of liked that Arcade 1-Ups weren't connected to the internet, but at this point, it seems like it's a pretty big net win. Not only do we get the free online play with NBA Jam, but we get firmware updates, and there's some nice additions to this update. Now, I say it's the first over-the-air update ever from Arcade 1-Up because there have been firmware updates before. It's just you'd have to get a new PCB to get the new firmware. Notably, Galaga had an update that fixed a memory bug where you couldn't save a score over 99,999 points. You could score higher than that, but it wouldn't save it when you turn the machine off. So there have been little things like that, but NBA Jam is much more complex than the other cabinets before because of that online play, but it also just involves more modern games. It's just a more substantial game. I'm sure if you looked at the code written out for this cabinet, it's much longer than any of the other cabinets they've sold to date. So this is nice that we're getting updates. Unfortunately, what we're not getting are any new players, unless that's buried as some kind of Easter egg. I haven't gone through all the rosters, but I would imagine if they were adding more players, they would want to publicize that, and they'd put that front and center, and it's not here. So, I've never been optimistic that they will add more players. I think if any of the players wanted to jump in, it would have been before when the cabinets were yet to be sold. Now that a bunch of them have already been sold, cat's out of the bag. I just can't imagine interest increasing unless maybe they sold like a monster number of cabinets. But let's look at what is here. The first point is the best point. Better distinguished cloned players. Now, this is where they are replacing a player who they do not have the rights for with a player they do have the rights for. So it looks like the same player twice. Cloned players are stand-ins for players in the original arcade game that could not be relicensed for this release. To make it easier to tell the clone apart, there's now a setting in the main menu that makes clones appear in grayscale. That's a good idea. You could choose for the clone's body and uniform to be grayscale, just their body to be grayscale, but the uniform remains team colors, or use full color as before, making their appearance identical to their teammate. That's definitely an improvement over what they have now. What I think they should have done with the clone players is just create a new fake basketball player. Fake name, doesn't need to be licensed, fake appearance, and then just use the stats from the original player. As somebody who's not a fan of basketball, that would have been a perfect solution. As it stands, having the same player repeated twice is a little bit weird. But admittedly, this is a nice improvement over how it was handled before. All right, next up, when the users depart an online session middle of the game, their players get assigned to one of the remaining users. This is how it worked before. The existing feature allowed you to complete a game and capture a win even if the other user leaves by offering you control of the orphan player. There have been two improvements to this for this new update. The orphan players will now preferentially be assigned to the player who controls their teammate. So you can't hijack somebody's team because their teammate left, which makes sense. And if you are assigned control of an orphan player, you will now be told in the pop-up message that announces the other user's departure, so it's not a surprise. It sounds like a good way to handle that. We rephrased requesting to join message to make it clearer you are waiting on the other person to act, not the other machine to act. That's a good idea. A lot of people assume there are problems with the hardware if they can't connect to a game, but in fact it could be the other person's internet connection. It could be the other person not allowing you into the game. So that makes sense. The kick option has been removed from the host's in-game live menu to reduce cheating incentives. So you can no longer kick people. I didn't know you could kick people. I don't think I'd ever popped the live menu while I was in game before. So I hadn't seen that. But it does make sense. If people are able to kick you out if you were winning, that's pretty rough. We've reworked the joining feature to make controls more immediately responsive. Factory reset machines will now include additional messaging about setting up internet access. So they must have seen not enough people set up internet access out of the box. Maybe they think the process wasn't intuitive enough. For bug fixes, there was a bug apparently in the original game of Tournament Edition where Elliot and Hori's team assignment reflected a trade that never happened. In the player select screen, the stats for clone players now reflect the players they replace, not the players they were copied from. That's huge, actually. That's the most important part. So the appearance is now better differentiated if you play with a clone player. But more importantly, you get the stats of the original player. And that's key because these games were balanced. And honestly, these games weren't balanced very well, but they were balanced to reflect the real stats that they plugged in. You mess with those stats, you've now messed with some of those teams. It made some of the teams unplayable if you're trying to win. So between this, actually using the original player's stats, and a visual distinction with clone players, that is really the high point of this update. But let's look at the rest of the bug fixes real quick. It's the first ever update from Arcade One Up over the air, so we gotta cover each piece. In the player select screen, the stats for the clone players now reflect. We've addressed a problem with some router models choking when joining games. Now, if the progress bar stalls, the host will step back its bandwidth several times before giving up. That's interesting. I'm surprised it would need very much bandwidth to even cause that problem to begin with. But this is good news. I know when I try to join somebody's game, I probably fail 3 out of 4 times. And I'll be curious to see if that improves now. They fixed a potential for a desync when a third or fourth player joined a session before or while entering initials at the start. If the joining user had a seasoned gameplay record and latency was present. So that sounds like a really narrow issue that probably wouldn't have affected many people, but good that they smashed that bug. Fix the potential for a desync if the user was accepted into NBA Jam the instant within 1/60th of a second between the title screen disappearing and the legal screen appearing. So, man, good on them for finding that bug. I can't imagine. Very few people must have hit that. They fixed a problem where games might not be joinable every second 10-minute interval after starting. So that's a big one. Well, that might have been my issue, why I couldn't join a lot of games. Available games list will no longer repeat names on multiple pages and now stops the ellipsis from being highlightable. Stop a case where people might sometimes be dropped the same time the fourth user leaves. If a connection is lost while trying to connect, the message will now correctly identify the public name of the user you were trying to join. Before, it might sometimes erroneously have given you your own public name in that message. Stop the main menu from gratuitously restarting sometimes if you change leaderboard option. And they've got some advice for connectivity. If you're having a problem, open the UDP port 1972 on your router and point it to the NBA Jam cabinet. And they have a link. I'll put the link below too. So Code Mystics are the guys who did the software for this. They did the programming to make this game possible. They also did Star Wars. These guys do good work. And they've done a really good job staying up on NBA Jam. The only thing we're really missing now are those additional players. But good for them. I look forward to this level of attention to detail on future cabinets that are Wi-Fi enabled, like the pinball games. Thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed this, if you're enjoying NBA Jam, hit that like button. Likes for NBA Jam helps get the word out about the video. Traffic slowed down a little bit in the last month, so I could really use your guys' help for smashing like. Share the video if you would, but the easy thing to do is hit that like button and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of NBA Jam and Arcade One Up. Thanks for watching this morning, guys, and I'll catch you later. Dripping